All right. Thank you all. And also special shout out to the folks in the chat already asking the really important questions, right? Will webinar materials be available for participants and attendees? Yes, they will. We'll give some instructions towards the end, but I'll go ahead and start to kick us off. So good to somewhat see you all, and welcome to this webinar, Preparing Youth for the Workforce and After School and Building Your Own Youth Worker Pipeline. We want to recognize the How Kids Learn Foundation for sponsoring this webinar in collaboration with Temescal Associates and with the California Afterschool Network. How Kids Learn Foundation is dedicated to improving the effectiveness of settings that support education and healthy development of youth. And this includes schools, this includes out-of-school time programs, Temescal building the capacity of leaders and organizations in education and in youth development, and the California Afterschool Network, which is a technical assistance provider for California that envisions those compassionate communities collaborating, right, to support our out-of-school time and expanded learning programs in the field. So thank you all. Hope you're in the right place, and we'll just go ahead and keep moving forward as folks join us. But again, feel free to add some. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout. So let me go ahead and just introduce some folks that will be speaking today and sharing their expertise on the topic. Introducing myself, good to somewhat see you all. My name is Lupita Perez, Program Specialist with the California Afterschool Network with the Equity and Quality Initiatives team. Followed with and joined by my teammate Bill Fennessy, Program Specialist for Workforce Initiatives, also with the California Afterschool Network. Want to join in and introduce Donny Faaliliu, Senior Vice President of Leadership and Community Outreach with the Afterschool All-Stars in Los Angeles. And also some folks coming in from Elk Grove. So Erin Sipes, Program Specialist with Elk Grove Unified School District, and Jane Ross, Director of College and Career Connections, also with the Elk Grove Unified School District. So thank you so much to our speakers. They will go into their introductions in depth later on for their presentations. So what we're hoping to accomplish and cover in this webinar is going to be demonstrating, right, how after school, often referred to as expanded learning here in California, is well positioned to provide work-based learning opportunities for our older youth that are in our programs right now. We're going to highlight some speakers and panelists that you just kind of seen and their successful program examples and knowledge on supporting older youth and acquiring those skills to get a job in expanded learning and to just be exposed to that as a career option, and just all while preparing them, right, for career success in the future where they hope to go. We're hoping to also discuss how expanded learning programs can be intentional about using this strategy to employ older youth, to get them exposed, and to thus create this pipeline, right, to get interested folks into the field and aware that, you know, there's options available and they can thrive in this space too by just getting that experience early on. And then finally, again, just sharpen up driving home this strategy. It's not going to be a silver bullet, right, to solve all of our staffing shortages or needs, but really getting into some specifics on how to develop this program from starting small or figuring out what capacity you have to grow this so that we can envision TK through 12 expanded learning, institutions of higher education and workforce development systems kind of working interdependently with each other. So that we have always a thriving expanded learning, education, and human services workforce kind of well into the future and something that funnels into each other. So before, just for context setting, we wanted to go over some acronyms and terms because the tricky part about language is that we assume sometimes that it's shared across the board, but we might have folks coming from all over and maybe not just California. So we wanted to share some terms that might be coming up. Of course, you've already heard in California, we often refer to after school as expanded learning field. It's also called out of school time, but just so that can show that it's all encompassing, right? This can be before school, after school, intersession, and summer programming formats. So that's why we kind of shift towards using that terminology. So we know it's not just after school, right? Any opportunities outside of the school day. CDE we'll refer to a lot, also CDE EXLD. That's just the California Department of Education, and then specifically the Expanded Learning Division. some funding sources that end up being good knowledge. And again, this is going to be provided to you, so you'll have all these terms and background in the slide deck. ASAS, the After School Education and Safety Program grant, that ends up being a pretty common funding source in California, as well as ASSETS, which is specific to teens. WBL, work-based learning, CTE will end up referencing a lot, is career technical education. Huge component as well, CBO, so community-based organizations. Work experience, so those internal internships and opportunities that build skills for students. Recognized internships, will show those as a little different. Those are those internship opportunities that are sanctioned by CTE and CDE, and then registered apprenticeships, which are registered with the state, but are in collaboration with employers, institutions of higher learning, and that usually have related competencies embedded in them for career success. So those are going to be some important terms to hear out for and see throughout. But the bigger picture, right, we wanted to highlight is our why now, and then some other compelling reasons, right, to think about the strategy of getting our interested youth in our programs right now in expanded learning, these work experiences inside expanded learning programs, so that we have this kind of stream and funnel into the field. So with this, California Afterschool Network kind of sees it through a continuum, right? Getting started, growing within, and going beyond expanded learning. And this is an opportunity for all those systems that I named early on, TK through 12, expanded learning, higher education, community-based partners, to be working together to identify, right, the entry points that are required to get into, aside from just our traditional recruitment strategies that we might have. One big strategy we want to highlight today is looking at our students that are interested in education-related career tracks or want to work with kids, getting them into a strong on-ramp into employment and expanded learning that we know can bring a ton of transferable skills that are going to be beneficial for folks that want to build their career early on, want to have a position that's going to be flexible for them while continuing to go to school or developing their education. And then just giving more exposure, right? The earlier we can catch students and catch their interests and get them the skills that will end up helping them later on instead of deterring them or taking up too much time is going to be a great equity strategy, right? And getting a diverse pool of new teachers or maybe future counselors or future social workers, or even better, staying in our expanded learning programs to grow within and have a clearly defined career track. And then kind of the last continuum is just thinking of going beyond, right? When someone caps out or has a new opportunity, where else can they go if they're interested in other sectors that might be related? And how can we all work together to continue to support youth, specifically older youth, in building their own networks and capacity? So with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to my teammate, Bill Fennessy, to give a little bit more in depth about the connections with CTE, expanded learning, and this specific strategy we're going to explore in this webinar.
Thank you, Lupita. Just want to talk briefly about some of the, by the way, this work has been done before. This work has been built on the shoulders of others. I know I first became exposed to this kind of work through Normandy Night, A World Fit for Kids, and then did some work in Pasadena Blair and Think Together. And we're going to feature a couple more programs with LA All-Stars and Elk Grove that have taken it even further in our current programs. So just kind of want everybody to know this may seem new, but it's not new. It's already been proven that it works. And we feel that with the increased need for staff due to the proliferation of funding in California in particular, that this will help. And as Lupita said, none of this is a silver bullet. This would be a great strategy that will help, but we'll have to combine that with other strategies to solve our problem. But want to touch in at work-based learning. Regarding work-based learning, this is exactly what we're talking about. And work-based learning is an instructional strategy that enhances classroom learning by connecting it to the workplace. Work-based learning includes the alignment of school and workplace learning, application of academic, technical, employability skills in work setting, and support from classroom or workplace mentors. So work-based learning is something that really, that expanded learning can embrace. When we go to the next slide, you will see that expanded learning and work-based learning do have quite a crosswalk between each other. The elements of a high quality pathway also match the 12 quality standards that California has developed. So it shows that the two programs really do embrace each other and support each other, and therefore are a great match. In the next slide, we will see this is a graphic of what typical expanded learning programs can do to support linked learning's third component, which is work-based learning. Many of you know about linked learning. I won't go into that, but that is the basis from which all the academies and this kind of work is generated in California, and as I understand, is a wave that's going across the country. So these are some things that can be done in the expanded learning space to support work-based learning. Today, however, if we'll go to the next slide, we're going to concentrate on two of these in particular. We're going to concentrate on the employment skills training workshops, basically how programs are training young people and preparing young people for the workplace, whether that's in our expanded learning programs or whether that's even out in the general world, right? Preparing young people to be able to go get a job wherever they choose to get a job. So while we will be focusing on building our pipeline today, certainly any time that we're giving our youth the experience and prepare them for work, it is going to help them and their families in that situation. When we look at the next slide, we are giving an example of an employment skills workshop series. This is a graphic that has been around and floated around here in California for probably the last 6 or 7 years. But it really does outline the steps that successful programs have used to prepare their students for the workplace. Again, whether that's out in the general population, whether that's working with CTE and preparing CTE students to take many different varieties of jobs, or in our case today, and our focus today would be preparing our young people to serve in our expanded learning programs after graduation. Moving to the next slide. The other phase that we will be talking about today is the job shadowing, work experience, and internships. Apprenticeships is not on here. That's something that we're working on. We hope will be coming up very, very shortly. But I think both of the programs that you are featured here today, and what I would tell you is that once you begin to do these programs, it's the first step into moving up the ladder, right? You can do it within your own organization, then you can do it in working with CTE, and then perhaps you can even entertain doing, doing apprenticeships. I'm sorry, do we have the next slide? I'm sorry, thank you. What you see here before you is an example of what was used in Santa Ana. It was a collaboration between the district's CTE department, the district's expanding learning department, and Think Together as a community-based organization. This is the actual schedule and plan for spring 2019 in an effort to increase the number of internships that the district was able to produce through this collaboration. And if we look at the next slide, you will see the results of that. The program was a collaboration, as I said, between those three entities. There was a 3-year goal was to begin the program and then significantly increase those internships. And these are only fall and spring semester numbers. And the data shows that we're showing here shows the number of students that completed the employability skills trainings, and then the number of internships that were created district-wide. So you'll see that we're close to 400 students per year as a six high school district. So close to 400 students took the employability skills trainings, and you can see that the internship program went from 19 the first year to 73 internships the second year and 130 in the third year. So this kind of shows you the potential of what these programs can become. And I know the two programs that we're featuring today are on their way here, or I believe in Elk Grove, they're on the cusp of connecting with CTE. So our hope is that you'll get a great view of what is possible. And what we do want you to know that this is possible. You can do this no matter what size program you have. And if you start small, that's great. But starting the program and starting to build it is going to take you to great places. And it may take a couple of years to get there, but if we get started now, it should be able to help solve our problem and support our kids, right? And getting jobs and support our families with young people getting employment. Next slide, please. Okay, so how I would like you folks to listen to this is the following presentations will sound very prescriptive. Well, they are prescriptive. This is how these two organizations actually put their program together. So this is exactly what they did, right? So it's going to sound that way. However, when you listen to the presentations, we want you to consider them as descriptive examples of this kind of programming. They're going to describe what they did. We want you to think about, okay, in my locality or in my environment, what would I be able to do, or what can I draw from this to be able to help me in what I would do in my experience? Because there's many different ways to do these things, and we want you to be thinking more about how it works for you while these very prescriptive descriptions are done. And then next slide. And then what to listen for. I think what you're going to hear and things that you want to capture are program readiness. What was the preparation and responsibility a program needed to have to get started or feel comfortable enough to get started? What are the recruitment strategies they use to recruit high school students or older youth? What was the student preparation and training? What was given to the students in preparation and training for this assignment? Where were the student placements? What sites did you pick to do this? And keeping in mind transportation mitigation, because there's many ways to skin that cat, but that's one of the things you'll want to think about when you determine what sites. You probably want your stronger sites and ones that students will be able to get to. Also, on the other side, preparing your elementary sites and staff for placements, right? Are your staff set up to take them in? Are you doing skill building, right? Are you getting to building skills along the way so that they're learning how to do this and building on those skills? And then lastly, what are the processes to think about to then move students to employment as the EXL staff? Now, this is probably newer than the rest of the stuff I just listed. And I think we will get a couple of great examples how these programs are doing it now, but I still think there are great areas for people to improve and go further on that. So with that, I want to introduce my good friend Donny from After School All-Stars in Los Angeles, California. Donny and I have worked together for years and years and years in different places. And I know from conversations with Donny that his program has made great strides in the last few years in doing this type of work, and super happy to have him present his program to you. Donny.
Awesome, appreciate it. Thanks, Bill, for the intro. So before I jump in, just like to kind of give some quick background of After School All-Stars Los Angeles, who we are, how long we've been in this field of after school and expanded learning. Our program launched back in 2002. It started off as a pilot in 4 middle schools, back when Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time was the founder of the program. Started off with inner city games in the early 90s with sports and recreation. And then, just felt the need to be able to create more of a comprehensive after school expanded learning program. So we launched in 2002 with 4 sites, and then, we're a community-based organization serving K-12 now, right? So currently we're at 59 sites. We are growing in the fall to 63 sites, so we're excited about that. And at the same time, serving 20,000 students annually. It's busy summer right now, and so just shout out to everyone that's here attending. I know summer has been wild, and but a lot of great opportunities, and that's the key word, opportunities that are being offered to students to attend field trips and also to be able to attend and provide specialty programs, and this just being one of them, right? And so quick background myself, was Donny Faaliliu, as mentioned, Senior Vice President of Leadership Community Outreach. And just want to just share and just let you know that I started from the ground up. I started off as a program leader, to a site coordinator, regional manager, to now be able to climb up the ranks to be able to serve as the senior vice president of this amazing organization. So definitely have been around the block for over 18 years of this organization. I joined the team back in 2004. And so kind of slowly diving in, wanting to set the stage before diving into this presentation. And that is that, you know, Bill and I, along with Christopher Mealy, who is our career exploration and workforce readiness manager, we talked a lot about what do we do in terms of how to improve this workforce readiness at the high school level, right? And at the same time, conversations about trying to build out and create this high school pathways program. And so we do have a high school workforce readiness program. We also have an initiative called Career Exploration Opportunities, CEOs, and that's where we introduce our different partners to our students, set up these Q&A sessions and getting a lot of those learnings there. But again, this is our first time creating this specific high school pathways program for our students. And so as we go to the next slide, again, just want to just thank Bill and Lupita and the California Afterschool Network, again, for this wonderful opportunity to be able to share this collective work. It was definitely teamwork on behalf of our Afterschool All-Stars Los Angeles team. And again, happy to be here to be able to share what we've learned throughout this process. This high school pathways program, again, was created in response to staff shortage in education and also in expanded learning, especially within our organization. And so we felt the need to create this pathways program, and not as a silver bullet or an answer to resolve our staff issues, staff challenges, but was an opportunity for us to be able to work with our young people to help them grow and build up the next generation of educators and expanded learning professionals. So here, what you see is a summary of our commitment as an organization to prepare our graduating high school seniors, you know, with the necessary practical skills and firsthand experience to work in the field of expanded learning. So as an organization, our goal has always been to help our students graduate from high school, prepare them for college, find a career that they love, and then to have them come back and make a difference in their community. And so through this Pathways program, we believe that it will help us to not only achieve the goals of our organization, but more importantly, the goals our students have set for themselves to get the most out of this experience. And so as we look at the Pathways program completion, you know, students will be employed by our Afterschool All-Stars Los Angeles organization and placed at summer school sites with a seasoned program leader, our frontline staff member. The goal is for each participating student in our Pathways program to continue employment with us in the fall at one of our participating sites. So before I move forward, I want to just preface my remarks by saying that, as mentioned earlier, this is our first year, right? This is our first year of launching this high school Pathways program. And so we really, you know, had to get together. We had to ask ourselves as a team, like, do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the capacity to create a high quality Pathways program? And the answer was an astounding yes. We just knew that, you know what, this was a need. We need to step in and we need to fill it. So our planning started this past February, and we're very ambitious, understanding that we're working with a very tight timeline, right? And then in March, we attended and participated in the statewide workforce convening kickoff meeting in California. And we knew then that we were on the right track. And so as we go to the next slide, we'll then go through the objectives of the high school Pathways program. And so number one, as mentioned, was to be able to drive youth employment. As an organization, we want to make sure that we do our best to prepare them as much as possible to enter into the workforce ready to go. You know, also too, as well as we look at number two, to prepare students, we wanted to make sure that students were ready. They were ready and prepared with 21st century skills to ensure success within our All-Stars ecosystem, your ecosystem, right, and beyond. And so sharing those 21st century skills of critical thinking, being creative, learning how to work in a collaborative environment, the importance of communication skills, et cetera. All these skills were incorporated into the last training that we did with our team that provided this topic of marketing and student recruitment strategies, and I'll be able to share that a little bit later in the presentation. As we go to the next objective of being able to train and mentor the next generation of leaders. Again, as a team, we discussed and came up with a list of trainings, both on the program and also on the compliance side of the work. And so many of the pathway trainings were part of already existing new staff orientation and onboarding trainings. However, we were very intentional and wanting to make sure that we understood that the way that you onboard our regular, candidates, our regular new hires, and the way you onboard high school students are very different. And so we needed to make sure that we were flexible in the training content and looking at our existing trainings from that perspective, from the student's perspective versus the adults. So in the process, reminding ourselves to be patient, check for learning, be flexible with them, and be able to walk them through this process. Also, we just have to keep in mind that they're still in high school. They're still in high school. They suffered the pandemic of 2 years of uncertainties. And so, for many of them, this is going to be their first job, right? This is going to be their first career. And they haven't had much of the adult experiences or responsibilities to worry about at this point in their lives. And so then be able to think about the next objective, and that is to be able to build healthier communities by cultivating leadership, self-esteem, and respect in our students. And then lastly, and wrapping up this slide, to be able to develop an education and expand learning and employment pipeline for them. So moving over to the next slide, I'm gonna spend a little bit of time on this slide because I think this is very important when you're thinking about launching your Pathways program. And again, something that we had to consider when we started kind of asking those questions of, do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the capacity? How do we even start? Where do we start? What's the first step? And, again, just thinking about, there are some action items that, you want to make sure that you have in place before you begin planning, coordinating, and executing your Pathways program is who needs to be involved, right? So as you see the list of folks there that, we definitely want to make sure that's involved in this process, in this Pathways programs. Number one was like, okay, we're going to create this program. We need to make sure that our principals and our counselors are bought in, right? We want to make sure that they're on board. And so before scheduling a meeting with your principals, we were very intentional in making sure that we had the framework of what this pathway program was going to look like. Taking a look at it again at objectives, goals, student outcomes. Our team did a great job of preparing presentation slides to share with principals. And as you can imagine, the principals were very impressed. They were just very excited to learn more and be able to support and be able to find ways on how can we help you make this happen at their site. And so it made it easy to be able to pitch and sell this program and to be able to receive their support. Also be able to think about and consider potential questions a principal may ask you about the Pathways program and what they want to make sure is in place to support the work. And so a few bullet points I wanted to highlight, and just want to shout out Elena Arias, who's our high school program manager, who were a part of these principal meetings. And that was one of the things that we've heard from the principals was the importance of the site coordinator position, right? The principal wanted to make sure that their site coordinator and their role in ensuring that their role in this timeline, that they were going to be that direct support to ensure that students are successful in this program. Making sure that the site coordinator is connecting with the students, sending out the reminders, the follow-ups to attend trainings, tracking their progress on their paperwork. How are you doing? How can I help? You have any questions? Any follow-ups needed to ensure that they're on track and be able to keep up with the timeline. One of the other considerations from some of the principals was also for us to be mindful of is that, students that may get accepted to college. And so if they get accepted to college, some colleges, universities have a requirement for them to attend a summer program. And so that principals were just concerned that, okay, if they were accepted to college, they have to attend the summer program. Can they still participate? Although that, hey, if they're going to attend this Pathways program, we understand that they may not, that pipeline directly into our expanded learning programs, but that they're able to at least be able to acquire some of the skills and the mentorship and training that we offer, that they're able to acquire those skills through the training. Another question and concern that came up to as well in these conversations with principals is how are we going to handle undocumented students? And so something to think about, and a lot of conversations will build to as well, and helping to build out our workforce readiness programs. And now, our new pathways program is, considering the program completion awards to be able to receive, some of the money that way, because we can't employ them. And so I know there's maybe a lot of questions around that. Definitely reach out. I know the Bill, Lupita, and California Afterschool Network can also offer additional support with this question. Human resource and compliance. Definitely making sure that our human resource, manager and director were part of these conversations. Our senior operations grant managers were part of these conversations. They definitely play a huge part in ensuring that students get employed. And that is through, make sure that life scans, TB clearances, first aid CPR certifications, et cetera. HR and the compliance team helped us think through the timeline of what our students needed to be cleared to work and when they could begin working at our summer sites. The program team is really important. I believe Mr. Max Figueroa is on the call too as well, who is our director of professional development. And so, having them be able to take a look at our program trainings and which ones would be beneficial for our pathway students. And as mentioned earlier, think about the content and how it was going to be delivered to them, keeping in mind, again, the difference between training your high school students versus training our adults, our staff. High school managers, and again, Elena Arias is amazing. She definitely played a key role in this process as, she has the relationships, right? So the high school managers, they have the relationships at the sites. They have the relationships with our site coordinators. They know the school program and culture. They have a better understanding of what's going to work, what's not going to work, and ultimately how to best meet the needs of our students. They also have a good understanding of the obstacles and challenges at the sites. And so at the same time, be able to provide insights on how to best approach and resolve these issues. The data department are really important to be able to support some of the important data points that we may need. The creative team, really important to be able to have in terms of be able to provide us with marketing materials, flyers, one-pagers, be able to theme out those principal presentation slides to help us promote and advertise the pathway programs. If you don't have a creative team, no worries. My go-to has always been in creating flyers is postermywall.com. Some of you may be, very familiar with that resource. Definitely use it. It has been a game changer for many of our sites. It's an easy plug and play. You search and find your flyer templates that, to your liking, and then you just plug in the usual details of the who, what, where, when, and you'll have a flyer done in less than 30 minutes. You may have others on your team too as well that you could think of joining and being a part of this team that could bring value. And so who is going to spearhead this project? For us, it was Liz Carter, who is our Director of Strategic Program Initiatives and Special Events, who stepped up to be able to take lead on this project for us. She's someone that has a lot of experience in organizing, planning, executing our org-wide events and other various opportunities for us. So it makes sense for her to be able to lead us with this effort. And again, just does an amazing job of being able to keep everyone on track and staying on track with this timeline. Also something to consider too as well as these trainings, right? So back in February, we were still operating, although we were in person, best way to do it was be able to do it virtually. So thinking about your Pathways program, you're doing this virtually, in person, a hybrid. So those are some things to be able to consider. Now that schools are opening up and allowing outside visitors, external partners to come out on campus, nothing beats being in person and working directly with students that way. And as Lupita mentioned earlier, just that vibe of being in person and be able to feel their energy and those interactions. And then lastly, most importantly, is having that timeline. That timeline is really important. The time to be able to stick to it as best as you can. As a team, we held weekly check-in meetings on Mondays and Thursday mornings to review the timelines. Your meeting check-in dates, will be different based on your needs and what works best for your team. At times, things may not go as planned, and so be willing and open to adapt and adjust as you go along. On the next slide, I'll be talking about the program application. And so when we're looking at the program application, this is not to be confused with your employment application, right? So when we're talking about program application, we're talking about the program application to enter and participate and join the high school pathways program. So we took a look at different internal applications we've used within the organization and created the program application from scratch. One of the notes I wanted to make sure I emphasize is the importance of taking our time with our students to review the program application and all the paperwork for that matter. The general application, be able to walk through the application with them, ensuring that they understand exactly what the application is asking of them, especially when we're talking about the essay questions on leadership, the pathways job description, the code of conduct, the commitments page. This is really important when we take a look at this commitment page, because you want to make sure that your students understand the expectations and commitments it will take to finish this program. Not to scare them away, but so that they have this information so they can check and make sure that their current schedule, this pathway program schedule doesn't conflict with what they already have going on. And so as we know, high school seniors have a lot on their plate. So rather lay it all out up front, before they join the pathways program, and find out later that they can't commit to finishing because of their their heavy load and the heavy schedule. So we want to make sure that that commitment page was important to be able to include. 2 layers of recommendation, their high school transcripts, and then students accepted again in our pathways program were then attending twice a week our mentorship and training programs, 2 hours a week for 8 weeks, which then turned into 9 weeks. On the next slide, you'll see the list of mentorship and trainings. And the introduction session was awesome. It was amazing to be a part of. That really set the tone and expectations for the pathways programs. Be able to send our students that encouragement, ensuring that they knew that they had a support system in us and that we had their backs and that they will be there every step of the way to set them up for success. A day in the life of an AFSCME All-Stars frontline staff member was really important topic to cover in the training, so students have a visual of what to expect. Building community, another great important training for our high school students on how to build trust and rapport from staff to students, student to staff, and more importantly, that trust with each other and as a team and building that community at site. The expectation here is that students will be able to take their learnings of this building community training and then be able to be on site working closely with a seasoned program leader to be able to facilitate these building community activities. For the marketing student recruitment strategies, as mentioned earlier, we just had this training a couple weeks ago. And so we actually moved this training to close out this list of trainings. And so the photo that you see here on this slide is from this very training that was held again 2 weeks ago on a Saturday morning. We took it back to the basics. We took it back to the basics of taking a look at the 5 stages of leadership, and that is stage 1. Leadership is just learning how to lead yourself before you can lead others. And so students worked individually and eventually worked as a team on how they were going to pitch and sell their expanded learning programs at student assembly that the principal invited them to. So we set the stage, the scenario, we had them get into groups, and we had them spend 15 minutes to be able to plan their introductions on what type of programs, activities that they were going to be offering. We advised them in this after school and expanded learning space to get creative, use any resources in the room to help them with their presentation. And this also included utilizing the resource of the staff that were in the room. And we saw that the 21st century skills were in action: the critical thinking, the being creative, learning how to work in a collaborative environment, the importance of communication skills. And everyone did a great job in their groups of being able to interact, creating their poster signs, coming up with their list of classes, and creating that pitch and sell for each of their programs. One of the groups used one of our staff, Chris Christopher Vaimili, to be able to come in and play guitar, and that kind of helped with pitching and selling their music program, right? So really having them think about this space of how you're going to pitch and sell to elementary students, to the staff, to the principal, and what that looks like. And so after the group's presentations, we were able to provide feedback on what worked well for them, and also sharing areas of improvement. A lot of students, when they were doing their presentations, were a bit shy, and so we know that kind of growing and with the experience, they'll get to a place where they're using their outside voice and they're feeling confident in those presentations. Employee handbook, incident reports, active supervision, child abuse reporting, the operations manual. These are all compliance training we wanted to make sure that they were set and ready with before stepping onto a site. Social emotional learning, definitely an important topic. First aid and CPR, and then the follow-up and input and feedback. And so what that is that for our Pathways students, we assigned one of our team members to be responsible for following up and capturing their input and feedback once they are placed at our sites in the summer. These check-in meetings with Pathway students are happening weekly, and then we'll have access to also additional mentorships and professional development trainings as well. So far, we've heard from some of our Pathway students that they want to also learn more about the first year in college, what financial aid and scholarship opportunities are available to them. So that was also on their minds too, as well as a career, find this pathway to be able to work with our summer sites, our elementary sites. Our next slide too as well is important to then be thinking about how to then place them. So we were able to get them, the program applications, mentorship and trainings. And now we're at the place where, okay, now we got to think about how we're going to place them. So number one was to just make sure that we had a confirmed list of our summer school sites and be able to map it out for our students. Number two was also to ensure that we had a list of our staff mentors, our seasoned staff program leaders, our frontline staff members that were going to work hand in hand and side by side with our Pathway students. And then number three was ensuring that our students were able to self-select what work site worked best for them based on distance and considering, as Bill mentioned earlier, transportation. And lastly, number four, the importance to be able to, before placing your Pathway students at a site, is just make sure that that check-in, schedule that meeting with the site leads, with the staff mentors, and just ensuring that they understand what the expectations are. And again, onboarding them from, understanding they're still students and they're transitioning into this new space. And so make sure that we're taking good care of our students as we onboard them at the site level. The next slide then is as kind of wrapping up and closing out, taking a look at our reflections and a lot of lessons learned as we've taken. This is not a laundry list or an exhaustive list, but an important list for us to be able to highlight in this presentation. That is, start planning early. To be transparent, we were working off a very tight timeline, as we mentioned. We started at the end of February. And so we had, again, some very ambitious goals, right? And as I talked about earlier, during our check-in meetings, like, you know what, can't do that. We got to be able to adapt and adjust. And one of the things that we were excited about that we weren't able to do this time around, but we'll make sure that we do next time, is to be able to schedule site visits, right? Be able to get our students at the site level, at an elementary site, be able to see the program live in action, be able to see the interaction with staff and students, taking a look at transitions, taking a look at how they deliver and interact with students, right? So those are things, for sure that we want to make sure that we have ready and we're prepared to be able to do as we think about planning early for the next cohort. As mentioned earlier in the presentation too as well, the buy-in from our principals and counselors, gain that initial buy-in and input and feedback. Weekly check-in meetings, super important. Even right now, as we have our Pathway students working at our summer sites, is we internally as an organization have our summer sites check-in meetings, and that's where we're also able to get some of that input and feedback aside from our assigned staff member that's working directly with, getting some of that input and feedback from our students and also hearing from our staff on how they're doing. Also allow enough time to be able to meet with the site leads as mentioned and our staff mentors, and then to be able to develop an evaluation pre and post survey. And lastly, one of the things I wanted to also mention too, as well as mentioned earlier about our Quest Workforce Readiness Program. We, in this program, it's anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. And so that first week of this Quest Workforce Readiness Program, we do a color assessment. The color assessment basically tells us what type of career the student will be able to select and choose to go throughout this process of being able to do a lot of the research about this career, right? And so with that would be in this color assessment, if students are looking to enter into education or expanded learning, we already have a pathway created for them to be able to get into. And so that's how we're going to incorporate that into the Quest Workforce Readiness Program. And then also Campus experience. Some of you are like, what is Campus? So Campus is a culmination. It's a culmination of what's from our We Are Ready. We Are Ready is the name of our middle to high school transition program and preparing our 8th graders for high school, college, and careers, right? And so this is a space where we're able to interview high school students to be a part of our junior camp counselors at this campus experience that is on the college campus for a week long in the summer, where we have a lot of different educational workshops, guest speakers that come in, preparing them for college through their personal statements. We were able to connect with the Plus Me project. If you're familiar with them, they were able to help with really getting our students to be able to be comfortable to be able to tell their story, and so be able to use that on their personal statements for college applications. So the campus experience is just another avenue, another space where we're able to utilize that space to be able to help and train and create that pathway for them. And then on the next slide, and wrapping and closing out, this is the team. This is our team that that joined in to be a part of this very ambitious goal of creating this high school pathways program. You may not have the infrastructure to have the support or layers, but just wanted to say that this is very doable. Definitely ensuring that you have a program person on board, a compliance person, your HR person on board, and then be able to work closely with your team to be able to create this this program. And again, and just some of the closing thoughts too as well is that because this team, we were able to support our students who went through 2 years of uncertainties, and this cohort was able to push through 9 weeks of additional work, right, to finish and complete this program. And so our goal is to keep building out this Pathways programs with hopes to eventually and hopefully, be able to get these students out to Boost Conference, maybe, to be able to facilitate some of these workshops. It's always better to hear directly from our students of what they learned and how the program impacted them, and prepare them to be able to work in our field. Although we have accomplished a lot in a short period of time, we're still learning. We're still learning. We're still, growing. And we know that it's definitely going to take a collective and group effort to be able to, make this happen. And so we're definitely going to get back to be able to regroup and reflect and begin planning for the next cohort. And so with that said, and wrapping up and closing out with a quote that I was able to steal from the California Statewide Workforce Convening Kickoff Meeting. This quote comes from Z. Klein from the California State University Chancellor's Office, who said it best. And she said, "We need to grow our own teachers and expand the learning staff in our respective communities and find ways to strengthen supports from one handoff to the next." And that is, the handoff from middle school to high school to college, and then to careers. And so I wanted to end off with that quote for us in this presentation. And then thank you all for the opportunity again, Bill, Lupita, and Ken, and turn it back to you.
All right, I think we have some questions for Donny, right, Lupita?
Yes, and I just want to shout out everyone. Definitely have 2 features to use. So if you want to drop some questions in the chat, but I'll go ahead and pull the first one that we have for you, Donny, from the Jamboard. And that is for participants, so students that are in this Pathways program, did you have to secure work permits? Or could you please speak more on being able to support undocumented students in this opportunity, or maybe some incentives that came there?
Yeah, so with to answer question number one, is that when we're looking at because our policy is that we're working with high school graduates that turn 18, right? So that's the population of students that we're working with. We haven't gotten that far to be able to then talk about, be able to bring on board those students that at an earlier age that would require a work permit. But this program was actually geared towards our high school graduating students that were turning 18 to be employed with our organization. For undocumented students, again, that's just a learning process for us to be able to continue to take a look at, and also talk with Bill too as well, just some of the resources that are out there, understanding that ELOP money could be used to be able to provide some of that program completion awards, and don't want to use the wrong term as well in this presentation, but the program completion awards for those students, so they can still participate and still receive some funding to be able to help and support them and their families.
Yeah, if I might add to that, Donnie, with our undocumented students, for those that are still in high school, and are not getting a job, but are getting this experience while being a junior or senior, the financial incentives we were able to offer, we could do for our undocumented students, so long as their experience during the year did not generate more than $599 worth of incentives. Because at $600, you then have to do a 1099, they have to have a social security number, so on and so forth. So if we were offering 3 semesters worth of summer, fall, and spring, we would make our incentives a few dollars less than $200, so that if they participated in all 3, they would have less than $600. If it was just 2 semesters, we might do it for $250, which was $500, which again did not put them into the 1099 or tax bracket. So this allowed the undocumented students to be able to participate. One thing I would caution you is when you use the language, and I'll make this really quick, you can't give people a stipend, though we refer to them as stipends, unless they're already employed under federal wage guidelines, right? So like coaches that are teachers get stipends because they're already employed as teachers. The other thing you don't want to use is, well, we're giving them a scholarship. That's another term that's often used, but scholarships have a whole nother big legal thing behind them. So the term we use is program completion awards, which is basically a gift for completing the program. It is not based on any wage. Okay, so that keeps you out of that kind of trouble. So hopefully that helps with the undocumented student question. Lupita, I think we have some more, right?
Yep, and I'll go ahead and surface the next one that came in from the chat. So what support do you have in place for students that might not be interested in pursuing a career in education or in expanded learning?
Yeah, great question. Appreciate it. And that's where we have our Quest for Success, our high school workforce readiness program, to be able to prepare students to get ready for the workforce through that program, right? This high school pathways program was specific to, again, addressing the staff shortage in education, expanded learning. But for those students that are not, interested in a career in education or expanded learning, they could then be a part of our Quest for Success high school workforce readiness program. And also too, as well, one of the things we're talking about too, as well, is that, to be able to have, for students that may not need to, enter and go through an entire 8 to 10 week workforce readiness program, we could have like the standalone individual workshops of resume building, of interview skills, right? Being a part of the mock interviews, being a part of our Q&A sessions with our different partners that we have. And what we were able to do was secure partners to be able to hold these Q&A sessions with our partners in corporate and community folks and businesses twice a month. So that was our goal. And our goal was to be able to do that every month for not only our high school students, but also our middle school students too as well. But yeah, that's where they would go to for those students that were not interested in education or expanded learning, would be to go through our existing workforce readiness program.
Got you. And I think we have time for one more, and I'm glad this is a fun one. Shout out to you, Donny, definitely for the fantastic work, and also the acknowledgements, your team. Question about if there's any plan for celebration of the great work, or maybe culminating events that happen for these cohorts of students that successfully go through the Pathways program.
Yeah, most definitely. We're definitely in the plans of being able to do that at the end of summer, to be able to highlight, be able to celebrate them. And again, just excited for them to be able to go through this process and this program with us, and also be able to hear from them, to hear a lot of the learnings, their experience, of how we can improve, right? How we can improve their learnings and what was missing, and what, did they want to get more out of this experience. But yeah, that's definitely in the works, to be able to plan out this culmination and an event to be able to celebrate their achievements and their accomplishments. And just excited. I mean, they're currently right now at our summer school sites right now. And so we're definitely excited to wrap up the year, and again, just be able to hear, a lot of the evaluations and regrouping and debriefing, and taking a look at how to improve this program next year.
Awesome, and thank you. I just want to still invite folks to continue to add questions to the Jamboard. We'll slowly be adding more responses to, maybe in a green sticky note in response as we go through. I'm going to add a couple, and same, still open in the chat. But with that, I'll go ahead and close out this part so we have time to jump into our next program highlight, with speakers coming in from the Elk Grove Unified School District. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Jane Ross and Erin Sipes.
Thank you, Lupita. So glad to be here. Hopefully this won't be too long and too boring. I know that webinars can get quite lengthy, so I will keep it at a good clip and provide the information as succinctly as I can. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the Summer Youth Internship Program that we've developed in Elk Grove Unified. Erin Sipes and I both have collaborated on this and developed a program. We're in our second year, but I thought it would help by giving you some information about our district first, just to understand the size and scope of things. Next slide. So Elk Grove Unified, we're a very large district in California. We have 67 total schools. I think we're opening our 43rd elementary school in a few weeks. And we have 9 middle schools and 9 comprehensive high schools. And then we have 7 alternative sites. Next slide. Well, that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. The second is the total enrolled students. We have almost 64,000 students in our district, split equally between elementary and secondary. In our district, secondary is considered 7 through 12. Next slide. So in setting up our program, Erin and I last spring collaborated on do we think we can put some of our high school students into our elementary programs to support the students in elementary and assist with the learning loss. We had a pretty healthy summer school program last year. As we tried to go back into the classroom, we wanted students to get used to being in the classroom, but also try and assist students in catching up. So Erin and I talked about, we identified a funding source to be able to pay the interns. In our district, I should have added that we also have about 63 CTE, career technical ed pathways and academies. And those are the programs that I oversee. So in working with Erin, we had in prior years established internship programs with industry partners. This is our first internship program internally. We have a very small one that we run with our facilities department, where some of our engineering students assist with facility planning, but that's max of 5 kids. This was the largest program we were getting ready to put together, but we used the structures of those prior intern programs to create something that we could move forward with. We pulled together a team of individuals, including a director from elementary. My position actually is a part of the secondary ed department, as is Erin's. We both are overseen by the assistant superintendent of secondary. We also included quite a few of my program specialists and my classified staff in this department, as it took. Last summer, we were kind of pushing a pretty clip timeline. I think we started advertising at the beginning of May. We were out at the end of May, and we had a very quick timeline to turn around and employ what we initially I thought was going to be about 25 kids. We ended up hiring 100, about 97 students. So we pulled a team together because it clearly was going to take a lot of hands on deck. I run a department here of 11 employees right now. So we put all of our resources into this for about 30 days and pulled this off. We tried to backwards plan. So we knew we needed to start, the summer school date was set. We knew we needed to have our interns hired and onboarded by that time. And we started talking about all the tasks we needed to complete to onboard students. The interesting thing about this program is we were taking students and helping them become employees. We had to cross over into a new hire process, but also address the needs of the child labor laws. So we set up a process with human resources to hire students. And there was a lot of investigation on ed code and our HR, what we needed in HR, whether minors needed to be fingerprinted, whether minors needed a background check. And we worked out a lot of those kinks last summer. Part of our team that I talked about included 3 staff from HR who we kept real tight with us so they would know where we were going to be going with this so they could anticipate the work that was about to hit them in onboarding and processing 100 student packets. We created our new hire packet to meet all the needs of the child labor laws, the student hiring needs, but also we needed to make sure that HR had what they needed. They have specific, they don't want the social security number, they actually want to see the social security card, and that's unique to our district. So we wanted to make sure that we hit checked all of their boxes. And so it was making sure with all of our partners exactly what they needed. We also talked to the elementary folks about what are your concerns in hiring teenagers. You won't be surprised to know their 2 biggest concerns were cell phone use and dress code. So we made sure that we included those things in our training of our new interns. We identified all of our summer school principals and supervisors. We partnered with 27 schools last summer. And so this was very new for everybody, not only our students, but our hosts. And I don't mean any disrespect by this, but our elementary folks are a little nervous about having teenagers on their campuses. They're used to the littles and we're used to the big kids. So we had to help them with understanding how to supervise teenagers as employees, but also helping them learn while they were on the job. So that there was a big piece of training the supervisors. And then we started with who we were going to market to, who our applicant pool was. In our district, we've worked really hard to provide internship opportunities, mainly to 11th graders, but we have since opened up to 10th and 11th because we recognize that it's a benefit to both, and there might be a secondary internship they could do the summer of their 11th grade if they had something available to them in 10th grade. So we looked at age limits. In our district, we require students to be 16 and over. As you all know, they can get a work permit in California at 14, but in our district, they only wanted to hire 16 and over. So even though they might be a 10th grader, they might not be 16 yet. We had to narrow that scope. And then we really looked at marketing to our CTE programs, looking at the sites and their possible language needs. I think the last count, we were up at like 129 languages in our district. And so we wanted to utilize our students to support our elementary kids with the EL support. And it was just a great opportunity to have our high school students recognize that as a strength, their ability to use all of their languages. So we actually had some students who spoke 3 and 4 languages apply, and we utilized that skill. Also, the special skills, some of our summer programs were developing STEM programs or athletic activities. So we had we marketed to students who had special skills in those areas so that we can make sure we can meet the needs of the elementary program. So there's a lot of things we were trying to address, what the elementary schools needed, what the administrators needed, what the opportunity for the students, but also kind of a compliant procedure for the district. Next slide. So like I said, we marketed to 10th and 11th graders, and we made a decision the first summer it worked out really well to market directly to students through our Synergy, our student information system email. We didn't market to parents. We didn't market to teachers. We went directly to the students, put the flyer in their email, and as a result, we got 745 applicants last year. Since then, with the increase of communication via email due to the pandemic, honestly, I'll just put it out there, I feel like we have over-emailed our students, so they don't really pay attention to their email anymore. So this last summer, we only had about 400 and some odd applicants, which was really bizarre, but we were able to go in and see that students didn't open their emails. We sent out 11,000 emails, and in the first week, only 250 of the students had opened it. So we had to shift gears really quickly. We then went through the CTE teachers, marketed to them, and that blew us up in the next week to 400. But next year, we're going to rethink our marketing on this, and I think we'll go through possibly the school's Remind app or things like that the kids actually pay attention to. I think the pandemic created a situation where we relied on emails, and then everybody started emailing, and the kids get just too much. And this wasn't personalized enough for them to pay attention to and open. So we're learning in this process as well. As I said, these were paid internships. We'll market that even more next year. You actually had to open this and read it to show that it was a paid internship. Next slide. Our application, I thought I removed this, sorry. Our application was a Google form application. We sent it to our 10th and 11th graders through Synergy email. We did an initial screening in-house, and then we added 2 interview questions to the application because we didn't know if we'd get 10 applications or 1,000 applications. So we tried to provide some opportunity for us to screen in the application. So we asked 2 questions. That was very telling. I would recommend that if you feel like you're going to have a large pool of applicants, and it assisted us in narrowing that pool of interviewees down considerably. And then we scored our applications, and we gave extra points to certain things, and I'll go over that later. The first year we did have an EdJoin application. HR wanted us to use their internal tool for hiring. Because it went so smoothly last year, we actually removed the EdJoin app because we created that pipeline with HR. They said, let's just eliminate the EdJoin app. We'll take your paper. It turns into a paper application after they get off the Google form. And it was one less step for our students, which was really, really nice. Next slide. So, this is, okay. So I just kind of went over this. We had 426, I think, applications received this year. So the first part was that Google form. Next slide. Our paper screening, we took into account a few things. Because that first year we had 745, we thought we would get more this year. Turned out a little differently, but we took into account the quality of their application. Unfortunately, because students are used to texting, sometimes when they filled out their application, it actually looked like a text. They didn't capitalize anything. They didn't really give us a quality answer. So we took those answers into account. If they had prior work with children, that gave them an extra point. If they participated in the CTE program and we were looking for those skills, like if a specific school was looking for, they were going to do some modules on culinary arts in their elementary school, or engineering or robotics or those type of things, or ag, we had some that were focusing on ag. We included that as a point. A desire to pursue education and careers, or careers in education, that actually automatically got them an interview. And I'll explain why later. And then professional responses to prompts and skills and interests. This year, we really focused on some of the schools. We asked our hosts, what are you looking for? How many students do you want? You know, are there any special skills that they're going to need? And that really helped us kind of hone in our application with what are your special skills? What can you offer the school? What languages do you speak? That type of thing. And so we were able to match everybody up really well. Next slide, please. So we interviewed, this was interesting. We interviewed 200 students this year. And the way we do it is a panel. I think it's next slide already. Yeah, so the interviews we let the students all know that we would be communicating with them solely through email. With that many applicants, we were not able to communicate via text. We weren't making phone calls, but we let them all know we're going to be communicating with you with email. If you don't respond, we're moving on. We did panel interviews and we kept it to Zoom again this year. In the past, we've always done, with our other internship programs, we do in-person panels. It's almost been easier to do the panels via Zoom now because the student doesn't need to travel to where we are, but we staff each panel with 2 people from our department. And then we also included some staff from the equity department in our district. And we ran multiple panels at the same time, 6 to 10 students on each panel. And we asked each panel 4 questions. And the students all got the same question. They heard the question before the next person, before they got the chance to answer. But it was really an opportunity for us to hear from them and see if they were interested for the right reason, poised and ready to work. And it helped us screen down even further. We saw 2 purposes for these interview panels. The first was to help them. Obviously, we needed to onboard students, we needed to select our applicants, but this is a really good opportunity to teach them how to interview. So at the end of every panel, we said, okay, if you'd like to stick around for some feedback on how this went, go ahead and hang in there. We never had a student leave the interview. They all wanted feedback, but we gave them kind of general information about, think about what you heard other people say that was really great, and think about what you heard that was not so great. And, a lot of our students fail to highlight their skills and abilities. Almost all of our bilingual students won't say that in an interview, which is just wild because it's such a great skill to have. So we encourage them and we coach them on how to interview better. So we see that as our goal here is to employ students into these internships, but the other is this is a great opportunity to help them learn how for the future on their employability skills. Next slide. So we ended up this summer selecting 127 students. The selection was based on their paper screening, their interview, their location. We really tried to partner the students up by interest and skills, but also could they walk to the elementary school they were near if they didn't have a car. As everyone knows, transportation is a huge barrier for kids to go to work. And so since this was a district initiative and all these kids went to our elementary schools, we tried to make it so that if they couldn't drive to a school across town, they could at least walk to the nearest one or get on a bus to the nearest school or ride their bike. And that worked out really well. We had a really successful program in that students that were offered internships near their home, they were able to make it there. Some of our district is over 300 square miles. And so some of our remote areas, they're not within walking distance, but we tried to do the best we could with figuring out ways to support students there. They had to be available for 100% of the internship. On our application, the last question, and it's a Google form, so it's silly, but we said, there was a statement that said, I confirm I'm available for all dates during this internship and can work every single day of the time frame, and they had to check the boxes, I confirm. And that wasn't necessarily binding, but every step along the way, we made them understand that this is, if you're going to take this opportunity, then you're going to be there the whole time. Because in prior years, we had students say, well, my grandma wants to take me to Hawaii, and this week I'll be gone. And another student who could have been there the whole time then missed the opportunity to be a part of this. So of the 127 students this year, we only had one who came back and said, well, I'm in this other program. And I said, well, you're going to have to choose. So it worked out really well that we front load with this information. I was a high school principal at one time, so my planning is always around worst case scenario. So I tend to overload students with information in the front so that we don't have to deal with issues at the back end. So, and then we select alternates just because at the last minute we'll have a few students who, oh, I can't do this. Something came up, a counselor called me and I have to go to summer school, that type of thing. So we do have some alternates to back up. And we actually ended up pulling in, I think we had 6 alternates this year. We ended up pulling in all of them. And then notifications if the students were chosen. Like I said before, we went all through email to communicate with our students. And it was important to us that if they interviewed, applied, got the job, whatever, that we communicated with them that they either did or did get moved forward in the process all along the way. And we said, and here's some reasons why you might not have been selected. We didn't really get into with each student. There was just too many, but you know, if you didn't make it through paper screening, these are some of the reasons why you might not have. And if you didn't make it through interview, these are some of the things that you might want to pay attention to next time. Because like I said, we try to use this as a learning opportunity. Next slide. So once the students are selected, we have a mandatory orientation for all of our students. If they don't attend the orientation, they cannot work. And it's a non-negotiable. We pay them for the orientation, but they must attend. We put out our clear expectations. Like I said, I was a high school principal, so I give it to them straight. We go over the attendance protocols, signing in and out for shifts at their site. We spend a lot of time going over the fact that they're going from student to employee is sometimes a hard shift for them. They're back on a school campus and they want to go into that student mentality, and we're having to say, no, you don't wait for every instruction. You take initiative as an employee and you move forward, but we also have to go over with them student privacy. So it's understanding mandated reporting. It's understanding if a student discloses something to you, what you do with it. It's things like, and I'll go over this in a little while, but what they can and can't do with students. We go over our safety information. Last summer was crazy because we were just coming back into the classrooms and we had all the mask mandates for students and staff and the 6-foot rule and all of that. So we did a lot of COVID training last year. This summer, it was much less, but it was still something we had to pay attention to. And our expectations for use of technology. This was a big concern for the sites. Our expectation was that the students left their phones in their bags or in their cars or whatever while they were on shift. We went over timesheet training. I swear the timesheet was the most complicated part of the internship altogether, but we made it through that training. How to handle students sharing information. We talked about mandated reporter information and who they should report to if they had concerns about specific students. And then also that they don't go home and share that information with family and friends, that there's an expectation of privacy and confidentiality with the information that they're privy to while they're on this internship. And then how to address behavioral issues and concerns with students. We were surprised at what the students thought the first year they were going to be doing. We had a couple kids who were really disappointed that they weren't going to be developing lesson plans and have their own classroom full of 3rd graders, all the way to we had students that thought they were just going to be working in the office. So we made it real clear, this is what you'll be doing. And it may be a whole host of things, from answering phones to supporting students to tutoring to blacktop supervision, all of those things. And that made this summer a lot more successful so far. And then we go over basic employability skills, how to be on time, how to refer to the teachers. We had some teachers who were upset that our students were calling them by their first name. But it's a fine line for our students to walk because now they're employees. And so there was some training that went on both sides with, maybe you have a discussion about what you call each other and how you handle that with students. Dress code, we went over dress code, I swear, till I was blue in the face, but it makes for a more successful experience. Trying to explain to students that these littles are looking up to them. And so we need to make sure that we're modeling appropriate behavior and that they're at a job. So we go over that and I'll show you that form. Next slide. So we talked about, and this seems like a no-brainer, but we wanted to avoid catastrophe. So we talked with the students, our interns, about they cannot do these following things: leave a campus with a student, drive a student anywhere, give them food or candy, address behavior with parents. So this one was interesting because these kids tend to be our really engaging students, and they're phenomenal with the parents, but we talked to them about how they would handle if a parent said, well, how did Johnny do today? And Johnny was a terror at school that day, that they should just refer the parent to the lead teacher instead of sharing with them and getting engaged in the conversation about a student's misbehavior. This was a big one. We talked about them taking photos and posting photos of the students. I couldn't have said it. The orientation that I did was almost silly how many times I told them, you cannot take pictures of the elementary school students, and you certainly cannot post a picture of yourself with any of them. So that was something that, social media has taken on a life of its own. It creates so many problems. So that was something we wanted to address. And then being isolated and alone with only one student. So we wanted them to know that, if a teacher says, can you take Johnny to the bathroom, that you ask the teacher to send you with 3. Or that if she leaves you in the classroom to tutor Sally, that she leaves 2 or 3 students. So we just try to protect the interests of all folks involved. Next slide. So to get the students ready for their internship, by the first day of work, they have completed a new hire packet. We process those here and get it so clean that when we hand it off to HR, they're pretty much just creating an employee identification number. We felt that was our responsibility because we literally dropped off 127 packets and needed them turned around in a few days. They receive an employee identification number. They participate in their mandatory orientation. They sign a photo waiver and liability release for us. That basically, it's our activity participation form, and it basically says they can be released if they're not behaving appropriately, but also that we're going to take pictures of them and use them for marketing. It's kind of this catch-all form, but it serves us well. We received, the site receives information about the student prior to, and the student receives information about their supervisor and host at the same time. And then everybody signs a dress code agreement. We get a copy of that, and the site gets a copy of that so that they can remind the student that they signed that if they need to. Next slide. This is our dress code form. I don't need to go over it, but I just talked about how we ensure that everybody's on the same page. I expected a little pushback from the students. I don't get it, but I didn't get any pushback, but occasionally, things that get loose if the sites didn't enforce it. So we really did a lot of training with the sites as, hey, we set this up for you. Now you just have to make sure that you enforce this because this is what they're expecting. So we got everybody to sign that they understood that this is what you're expected to wear. Next slide. I know in the last presentation, there was some discussion about work permits and I-9s and all of that. This is what's interesting because I am the district's summer work permit issuer for our internships, but I also serve as a supervisor of the interns. So we had to really think that through. I can't sign as both. So we worked something out where someone else in my department who also is an issuer, she signs as the issuer, I signed as a supervisor, but it does require a work permit. So one of the questions I often get is, if we don't have right to work documents, can we put a student through as an intern? And unfortunately right now we cannot in this program. We have other opportunities, but this is not a program in district that we can support unless a student has a right to work documents. And every year we've had a problem with a couple students. Some of them, it's just, they just need to get the right documents. And hard to say, but every summer we get a couple students who they don't have the right documents they need. So we look for other programs to partner them with. I start prepping the students the minute we start interviewing to find their social security cards. For some, they're like, they've never pulled it out since they received it. Their parents received it when they were infants. So honestly, the biggest thing is having them find those documents soon and signing the social security card. We had some parents sign the social security card for the student. That created some problems, but we asked that they find those documents. Those are employability documents and they need to have them no matter where they go. And then if we're creating a work experience program, this is not a work experience program. We do not give credit for this one, but we have discussed whether or not we would do that in the future. If so, then there's a whole nother packet of stuff that goes on with a contract, and it would just be a couple more things, but it would allow them to earn credit while they were earning money. It gets a little wonky with their Elk Grove employees, as well as in a work experience class, as well as getting paid. I think we could probably pull it off, but it would just create a little tweaking to the program. Next up. So our supervisors, we have a mandatory supervisor, and I call it mandatory. We hope they'll come. I try to really hit home the mandatory part. But we held it 3 times to make sure we got through all of them, all 28 of them this year. By the first day of work, we hope that the supervisor will have the ID badge for each intern. We create those here so that they can be identified on campus. Every year I threaten that we're going to get t-shirts for the kids so they'll be recognizable on campus. We haven't done that yet. Hopefully next year. And then they'll have an emergency contact information for our students. One thing we recognized was that our elementary sites don't have access to secondary student information in our system. So we didn't realize that last year till the last minute. So we created an emergency contact form that goes to the sites. We send it directly to the sites that says, if something happens to the student, call these folks, so that they've got that right there. We put it in a binder and it's ready for them. And then the orientation checklist, which I'll go over in a second, sign-in logs for their use, and the dress code agreements. We ask that they, like I said, participate in the hosted orientation, and that they provide their contact information to the interns for anything they might need. We also I ask them when I train them to start creating a list of tasks that interns can do if they have downtime. No matter where we place students, whether it's this program or anyone else, I think they underestimate how much work a high school student can get done if they're engaged. Bored high schoolers are the worst high schoolers. And so we tell them, start making a list. Like, do they need to refresh your emergency exit signs? Do they need to do your bulletin boards? Where should they go when they think they have downtime? Because that's when they start getting doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. So we ask them to do that. I think probably half of them take us up on that idea. And those are the sites that are hugely successful with our kids. Next slide. This is an orientation we send to the site. We ask them to pull all the kids together and do basically a new hire orientation. These are things that I think we forget about. We do it with new staff. Well, we try to do it with new staff, but this is something we have to remember, that these are employees now and not just students. So we ask them to show them where the staff lounge is, where they can put their lunch, where the bathrooms are that they should use, where they would go in case of an emergency, who to report to, how to call in sick, off-limit areas. If there are areas they are not supposed to go in, they need to know that. Our kids want to be compliant. They just need to know the parameters. We asked they go over this the first day. This year, actually, some of our sites held the orientation the week before, which was awesome. It helped with the kids' nerves. It was really successful, and we paid them for that orientation as well. So we asked that they be really super clear about expectations and limits. We show them what we've trained them on so they know what they can expect and they can hold that line. And that to remember that for a lot of them, this is their first job. They don't know how to be employees. They know how to be students, and they're in schools. So they're going to revert to that student behavior. But for them now, this is a job. Next slide. So we asked our sites to remember that we are growing our future educators. to give them real work, be honest. I'll be honest, our least successful sites are the one who tolerate poor performance and then tell me at the end of the summer, well, Johnny didn't do a very good job. Well, if they're not going to address the poor performance and they don't let me know, then that we're reinforcing really bad employability skills. And that's not good for anybody. So if they're not comfortable providing that structure, then I let them know, my team, like, well, then let us know. We'll come out to the site and we've had to go out to a couple sites and sit down with the kids and say, you know, step it up. And this is what we expect. And I'm fine to do that. It's just keeping that communication open and being honest with the kids, that we give them honest feedback. And then we ask that they include them when they can. They have staff meetings. I mean, we said, can you invite them to your staff meetings? And make sure to explain what's going on the school campus so they know how they can assist. And like I said, again, it's what to do when they're done with their assigned work. It's amazing. That's a skill set we're finding, that kids, they'll get the task done that you told them to do, and then they don't know what to do. So we have to help them along with that. Next slide. We host intern staff meetings every Wednesday. So someone from our department, we take them into groups and we host a Wednesday meeting from 12:15 to 12:45 on Zoom. And we just check in with them and say, how are things going? You know, what can we assist with? We want them to know there's a point person who's watching. You know, the sites are definitely watching, but this added support, we did it the first year because we threw this program together so quickly and we just wanted to make sure everybody was online. We honestly thought we wouldn't need to do this summer because the sites have now, this is their second year, everybody's been trained, but the students said it was one of the best parts of the program and the sites said they appreciated support. So we kept it going this summer and it's been really great to get to know all the kids a little bit better. We asked that they put them on a Chromebook, let them use their phones, put them in a quiet area. The best ones are when they have the whole intern team on one Zoom, on one camera, and we get to see the whole team together and how they interact. It's been really fun on these meetings. Some of them don't last for the whole half hour, but it's just a quick check-in. Next slide. After the final day, we want them to celebrate. Last summer, we were still in the COVID restrictions. We couldn't really do much with them. This summer, our hope is to have a get together at one of the schools just to celebrate the success that they've had and let them know how much we appreciate them. We do 2 evaluations, one of the student by the teachers and the staff at the school, and then one the other way where the teachers and the staff at the school and the students evaluate our program. So we ask them, what would have made this better? What did you like? What didn't you like? You know, how can we support this program? We've gotten great feedback from those surveys. And also that work-based learning evaluation, that's now that CalPADS upload, the internship evaluation. So we use the categories that were required and we created the evaluation around that. And now we do the upload and all the information goes in there. So that's been good. And then we do a brief out with this team and the elementary folks and HR and all of that when it's all done, and say, as soon as it's done, what went well? What do we need to change for next year? Because when next year comes around, we won't remember all those things. So we try to pull together and just talk about, all right, how do we tweak these things? And if it's just a tweak to a forms or whatever, we do it right then. And we get ready so that next year we're locked and loaded to run it again. Next slide. Future planning. So this year we tried something new. A couple of our sites asked for 15 students. Most of them have between 4 and 6 students. A couple of them asked for 15 kids. And so what we did was we used some of last year's best interns as leads at those sites. There's 2 purposes for this. One is we're trying to create a paraeducator pipeline. We have a need for paraeducators in our district. We can't fill those positions fast enough. Also with the changes to TK and pre-K, we need more folks in those programs to work. So we picked up 6 lead interns from last year. They already have the employee information or the employee identification number. The onboarding was simply, we did a quick interview. We picked 6 of the 18 that applied. And then we pulled them through, let HR know they were back on, and we placed them at sites. We did a separate training with them on, here's what you're going to do to provide support to these large teams. There's a couple that had 8, 9 schools or interns. The idea being that those students, they're the ones, the 6 that we chose are staying local for college. So they're going to UC Davis, they're going to Sac State, they're going to go to the community colleges in the area. They can work part-time with us next year. They've already got an EIN, the employee identification number. They have had 2 summers now of experience. And the hope is we're seeing if we can create a pipeline to employment in our district through this program. The other thing is that we're working on an education pathway, teacher education program in 2 of our high schools for 23-24. We initially had thought this year, but with COVID and everything kind of got waylaid. So we are trying to create an education pathway that will include this program, but also we're using some of our interns on our advisory as we develop these pathways at our 2 high schools. Next slide. That's it. We are, I hope I just feel like I talked to a blank screen. So if you have any questions, I be happy to answer them.
And I can pull some in. Thank you, Bill, for just writing out in the chat that we've answered some stickies in green. And this is a mix of all those speakers and presenters here, so where it applies. But one question I did want to bring up for you, Jane, and Erin, if you want to chime in, and you brought this up, Donny brought this up too, but are there any common reasons for resistance when it comes to adopting these programs that you kind of had to strategically work through?
For some, it was a hard sell in the elementary space. They're not comfortable with teenagers all the time. They were nervous about taking on that additional supervision last year. So that was a struggle. And then working through the hiring of minors as interns, that was a challenging thought process for some. So we worked through that, and as the district's work permit and work experience, I don't know, expert, I don't know if that's the thing. I lead those programs in our district. I have too much information on child labor laws and what I know we can and can't do. And so we had created the internship programs for other stuff. This was easy. There's no hazardous work. There's no, all of those things. So I was able to say, yes, but we can do this. We've got these things in line, and they trusted us. They trusted Erin and I to make this happen. And honestly, the biggest barrier is the funding source. And Erin she was like, we got this. So
I will add though, one of the other challenges is prioritizing the funding, because at least in California, we cannot count the student interns toward our staffing ratio. So, in places where budget is tight, then that's a consideration is, am I having to give up other staff members to be able to employ these interns? But I mean, for the last couple of years with the COVID relief funding and some of the things that are coming into the district, we have options. But there may be a time when we don't have as many options, and we have to prioritize that. And so we are working on options for trying to make this sustainable so that those students will come back and be employed and qualify for the ratio once they graduate from high school. And so we're kind of investing in our own future by bringing these students in. So that's kind of one of our intents.
And we're planning for the worst also, that if we aren't able to pay interns, we can still offer it as a work experience class for credit. And a lot of our students want to have that internship experience on a resume or on their college application. So we could shift gears. I don't know if we'd get 700 applicants, but I know that we would be able to fill the positions that way. It might be a hard shift the first year.
And thank you. We're doing great with answering a ton of questions. And unfortunately, on our end, we can't see attendees and participants. So it is going to be heavy participation in the chat. Just wanted to leave space if anyone had any lingering questions or something that come up after hearing.
I think if they raise their hand, Nat can be able to identify them.
Anonymous. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Martha. All right. Awesome. Well, I do have a question though, actually. So when you're approaching the skill building aspect, and I know you brought up a lot of skills that will be good for employability in general, like interviewing and getting feedback on how to show up on the job. How did you approach the skill building throughout the process for the interns that were participated? Was there any like stackable learnings or approaches that you took when you kind of developing that series or progression for them?
Are you talking about it like in the staff meetings?
Yes.
Yeah, so those meetings are primarily for a check-in, but we do double back on those employability skills, the 21st century skills, you know, about the collaboration, the communication, all of those things. The gals in our office, they actually they set up a PowerPoint. They all do the same thing every week as they go into those staff meetings and make sure that they're hitting on certain things. We get feedback from our elementary partners on, hey, there's some areas we're seeing they need support in, and then we kind of go over those in the staff meetings. This is a quick program. It's 1 month long. Summer school is quite short in our district. So we do a lot of prep work in the onboarding, a lot. And then we kind of have to set them loose and then just check in and reinforce those things.
And thank you for answering that. And puts it in context too, that this program might be a little shorter than what was presented earlier too. Wanted to share some shout outs out loud. So both presentations have left me inspired to continue our work. Thank you. That was from Marta Cordero. So just wanted to share some kudos. And for Jane and Erin and maybe Donnie too, were there any kind of closing thoughts before we go into our last remarks, or while we wait for maybe some more questions to come in from participants? Anything's coming up for you?
I guess the thing is just the like the willingness and the openness to do the work, right? I think that was something, you know, that again, this was something new to us. It was, you know, no one really had any like historical perspective or, you know, where to really kind of, I mean, the conversations with Bill definitely helped. But just that willingness, because everyone had their different roles and responsibilities already cut out for themselves. So this was additional work on top of what we were already doing. So it was getting that buy-in and that willingness to get that collective team to come together to be able to work on this project. So I think it just really boils down to that, just like the will and skill, right? Just like the will and skill to be able to create a program, then be able to follow up and follow through.
I think just a couple of things I'd add real quickly on the equity side is I get asked all the time, where are we going to find our new diverse expanded learning staff? Where are we going to find our new diverse teachers and the teachers that we need? And the fact of the matter is, it's the students we're working with right now. That's the diversified future of all of those things. And I think sometimes some other adults, maybe not those here in the room, kind of overlook that and don't realize that. But that's why growing your own and doing this, I think, is a foundational answer for eventually solving those problems and creating what we want. And I think this is the first step of many. The other thing is, I know there's a Gallup poll that I think is really striking, especially where equity is concerned. It says that students of color or those that are socially, economically disadvantaged, 65% of them will take their future career and or educational advice from somebody in the workplace rather than their teacher, their parent, or their counselor combined. So what that kind of tells me is if we're not putting our young folks in work situations or in these places, we're not doing them any service. If 65% of them are taking advice from what they learn from people at work, then it really is important that we get our students out into the workforce and give them these types of work experiences.
On that same note, I think that's why it's super important for us to invest the time and energy into training our hosts. of our interns so that they understand the impact that they have especially when a student may not be performing well. We've had some hosts, whether this program or others, say, well, they're just kids. But man, we are really doubling down on if we don't address it, we're actually creating a problem for the next employer. And so helping our hosts understand the impact that they truly have is so large. And it's such a good experience for our students, but we do have a responsibility to help them along the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I know we're a little worried about time, but definitely covered a ton of information, and I hope it wasn't an overload. Again, just wanted to remind folks that you will have access to this slide deck and also to the recording, and we'd love feedback, and definitely feel free to keep adding to that Jamboard or look back to it. I just want to thank our speakers for sharing so much of your expertise, the vulnerability, and sharing also some challenges that you might have run into, and being transparent with how much legwork you really had to put in and how much effort went into being intentional so that we have great experiences for our young people that are interested in working with youth and interested in staying in a place that maybe they were previous after school students or expanding learning students, and being able to give back in this way while building up their skills and their toolkit. So I just want to leave you all with some closing remarks and just reminders. If you are a reader, inputs are my top strength, or just love research and new things coming out, webinars, briefings, you can definitely visit the Temescal and Associates website and have a couple that are related to this topic, but then extend beyond this topic that all pertains to youth development work, education, expanded learning. Rolling forward. And then if you are kind of interested in this type of learning model too, for your own trainings, PD, inviting others, and want more webinars, you'll definitely get more information in an email coming soon following up from this session from How Kids Learn. You can also definitely check out their YouTube channel for some other learnings and different ways to leverage what's being talked about around California and also just nationwide in different efforts. I wanted to highlight too the importance of our collective stories and voice and getting more information and data and things that are going to help us benefit in the future when thinking about our workforce. And so this is just a call out to all youth serving professionals, whether you're a volunteer, a frontline staff, a site coordinator, which are pivotal in these roles, directors, anyone, if you work with young people, definitely follow this QR code that'll be in the slide deck when you get it to fill out the Power of Us survey so that we can get some new data and information and just advocate a lot more strategically and better with the new context with all the things we faced and moving forward. Some things to consider as well as we left, and that you're going to be unpacking all this information that speakers kind of shared, is asking yourself, right? Looking at your own context, your own capacity. And I love the shout outs that were given in the chat. We're definitely hoping that you leave inspired, whether you're starting small, already have the capacity to start something big, maybe in the flexibility now. Now's the time, right? Like Donny said, the key word is opportunity. So asking yourself, do I have the access to resources, support, and capacity to begin pipeline or pathway efforts like the ones highlighted today? What recruitment strategies might make sense for your organization and your school community, but also your folks, right? I know Jane brought this up too. If email heavy is not working, the willingness to try some other strategies aside from, current efforts going on for recruitment into needed positions. Asking yourself if you've identified placements. We try to put an emphasis too on host sites, right? Not just plopping young people in their new work experience or, opportunity first job with a site that's not prepared to hold them and to build their skills and to feel comfortable with them coming in and interacting in and embedding themselves in that culture of that school site and what their focus is. So being able to ask yourself that. If you're at the level to think even deeper and maybe want to talk about transportation strategies, thinking, do you have some local programs that make sense that are close to elementary school sites that would be great placements for them and that offer a variety of different opportunities for them to get to work. safely and just consistently too, right? To build that practice of having that job. Finally, some things to still hold to. What do I need to prepare for both the youth that are participating, right? The skills that they're learning and pushing them through and supporting them upon completion. And then also for those host sites that are our own organizations and staff and still need that pouring into so that they can build their school site, their skill building words, right? Themselves. So not losing sight of our current employees and our current staff that want to grow in their own roles. And then finally, just any processes that you want to develop to successfully shift folks into employment. So if you're starting off these young interns with getting a completion award, right, where they're not having their employee identifications or they're not employees yet, we're hoping upon completion they do. What systems do you have in place? One that was highlighted, right, is tutoring for the paraprofessional or IA exam. So things that you can embed in these programs that will help them along the way and then clean up that pipeline into employment so that we have less and less barriers for our young people that just are passionate and reared and ready to go. So some things to hold. Definitely wanted to add in the chat. I know everyone is asking, what resources can I take? Are there any examples or documents that we can be provided? We did want to share just an expanded learning pathways exploration overview document. This will just prompt you. And again, it's embedding and sharing this opportunity that we have right now with the historic amount of funding in California to think a little strategically about our collaborations and what ecosystems we're bringing in. We brought up the workforce boards and organizations and CTE departments, just different key players, knowing with the influx of TK and kinder, if that hasn't been a need before. So being able to know, right, what role you can play as an individual that's working in the field, as an employer, right, that's looking for staff to hire, and that also has the responsibility to support current staff that sometimes feel overloaded on sites. And then finally, kind of just thinking as a state system, what handoffs do we have that are promoting success, that get our kids through school, into college, into career, or whatever is going to set them up to build these new generations of successful experiences in the workforce. So with that, did want to highlight just the CAN team we kept bringing up that's supporting workforce initiatives. If you want another soundboard, thought partners to get involved in this work or different areas that you might want to support, we try to play that role of convener and connector, right? So folks can still stay inspired, but feel that they can be safe to ask some questions that they're unclear about or to get with the right folks in their area that makes sense in their context. So in the slide deck, you'll just have access to myself, Bill Fennessy's email, and Tiffany Gibson. Again, the equity and quality side of the California Afterschool Network. It's overseeing a ton of resources and just anchoring ourselves in the commitment to be responsive to those evolving needs of our professionals right now in expanded learning, and that end up handing off into related sectors, but ultimately should be ready and prepared to hold our youth and the type of integrity that we want, because we know programs across the state are just so critical for young people, for families and communities. So wanted to highlight, and again, just leaving a big thank you and space for our speakers and our panelists to share, some closing thoughts, some thank yous, and then space for you all too to leave some closing messages in the chat, since unfortunately we couldn't be able to see you on Zoom because it's the webinar platform. So leaving space for our speakers, any closing thoughts, and then for you all, leaving some love in the chat.
I think I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. I'd really like to thank Donny, thank Jane and Erin for their contribution today with the programs that they're doing, which are really amazing. I do think the slide deck is a great resource. It's got a lot of step-by-step and a lot of things for folks. And I really want to encourage folks to get started and do this. You can do this even if you have one high school and one elementary school and you start with 5 kids. Get started, start doing this, because once you get good at this and your organization gets good at this, it's going to lead to more opportunities that we believe are coming in the future. So thank you all again very much. And thanks to Sam Piha and thanks to How Kids Learn for providing us all this incredible opportunity this morning.